Ladies and gentlemen, walking away is an act of courageous boundaries. There is a moment, a quiet, powerful moment, when the person who has given everything finally stands up, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with clarity. This moment isn't loud. It doesn't look like a dramatic exit or a slammed door. It often happens in silence, maybe even with tears, but it is in that stillness that the bravest choice of all is made, to walk away. For the super empath, the one who feels everything, who sees the world through the lens of compassion, who absorbs pain and reflects back love, this moment isn't easy. It doesn't come overnight. It's preceded by months, sometimes years, of trying harder, loving more, sacrificing deeper. Empaths don't walk away because they've stopped caring. They walk away because they finally understand that caring should never come at the cost of themselves. Boundaries are not walls. They are bridges to self-respect. Let's get something straight. Boundaries are not cruel. They're not cold. They are not the absence of love. In fact, they are the presence of it. Boundaries are how we teach people how to treat us. They are the lines we draw, not to shut people out, but to protect the sacredness of who we are. When a super empath walks away, they are not just creating space between themselves and someone else. They are drawing a bold line that says, I will no longer be a participant in my own depletion. That is boundary work at its highest level. And that takes incredible courage. It's easy to say yes. It's easy to keep giving, to keep hoping someone will change, to keep extending grace long past the point of your own exhaustion. What's hard, what's brave, is saying, this is no longer healthy for me. It's choosing yourself when everything in your wiring tells you to keep choosing others. The myth of goodness and the trap of overgiving empaths are often conditioned to believe that their worth is tied to their willingness to endure, that their goodness is measured by how much pain they can absorb without complaint. But that's not love, that's martyrdom, and no one wins in that story, not even the empath. There is a myth that walking away is giving up, that it's cruel, that it's cold, but the truth is, there is nothing more loving than knowing when it's time to go. There is nothing more sacred than telling yourself, I deserve peace. When you stay in spaces where your empathy is used instead of honored, you begin to forget your own voice. You begin to doubt your intuition. You slowly start to believe that you are too much or not enough. Sometimes both at the same time. And that's not what you were put on this earth to feel. Empathy is your superpower, but it must be paired with discernment. Otherwise, it becomes a leash rather than a light. Walking away is an affirmation of self. Worth walking away says, I deserve reciprocity. I deserve peace. I deserve relationships that nourish, not drain. It's not about punishment or revenge. It's about truth. It's about no longer betraying yourself to keep someone else comfortable. It's about saying, my needs matter too. We don't talk about this enough. Leaving can be an act of love, not just for yourself, but sometimes even for the other person, because enabling unhealthy dynamics helps no one grow. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both parties is to step away and stop participating in the story. What courage really looks like courage isn't always battle cries and bold declarations. Sometimes it's that trembling voice saying, I can't do this anymore. Sometimes it's packing a bag, deleting a number, unsubscribing from the chaos. Courage is honoring your emotional truth, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. There's this quote I love, the only people who get upset about you setting boundaries are the ones who benefited from you not having any. That's real. And it's why walking away often comes with grief, guilt, and confusion. Because empaths don't want to hurt anyone. But the real question is, why is protecting yourself considered hurting someone else? You don't owe anyone access to you, let this be clear. You don't owe anyone continued access to your heart just because they once had it. Growth sometimes means outgrowing, and you are allowed to evolve beyond the people, patterns, and places that no longer serve your highest good. When a super empath walks away, the dynamic changes, the power shifts, the emotional tether breaks, And in that sacred moment of release, the empath finally begins to breathe again, not because someone else gave them permission, but because they gave it to themselves. Closing reminder, the bravest thing you'll ever do is choose yourself. Walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the moment you say, I love me too. And that, more than anything, is the beginning of freedom. Empathy without limits becomes self-abandonment. Empathy is a beautiful thing. It's the ability to sit with someone in their pain without trying to fix it. It's hearing beneath the words. It's choosing connection over judgment. Empathy is what builds bridges. It's the invisible thread that binds humanity. But here's a truth we don't talk about enough. When empathy isn't paired with boundaries, it stops being connection and starts becoming self-abandonment. There is a very fine line between being emotionally available and becoming emotionally depleted. Super empaths, those rare, deeply attuned individuals who feel the energy of the room, who anticipate needs, who soften when others harden, often don't notice when they've crossed that line. Not because they're weak, but because they're wired for care. It's instinctual, reflexive, automatic. But over time, unlimited empathy begins to chip away at your sense of self. Because the more you absorb what isn't yours, the less you're able to hear what is. Empathy is not an invitation to abandon yourself. There's a moment, sometimes subtle, sometimes gut-wrenching, when you realize that your ability to understand others has come at the cost of understanding yourself. You're so tuned in to everyone else's emotions that you can't locate your own. You're so committed to someone else's healing that you've neglected your own wounding. You've said, I'm okay, so many times that you no longer know what okay actually feels like. That's not empathy. That's self-abandonment dressed as compassion. Let me be clear, empathy is essential to human connection. But when it becomes unconditional self-sacrifice, it ceases to be healthy. It becomes a transaction where you pay with your peace. The trap of emotional overextension when your identity is built on being the one who understands, the one who forgives, the one who holds space no matter what. It becomes almost impossible to say, this is hurting me. Why? Because the story you've been telling yourself is that your worth is tied to your ability to be there for others. So you keep giving, you keep showing up, you keep understanding long after the situation has become emotionally unsafe. This isn't love, this isn't empathy, this is survival mode compassion. This is maybe if I love harder, they'll finally see me. This is if I just stay, maybe it won't hurt as much tomorrow. But here's what's true, your softness should never require your silence. And your empathy should never require your erasure. Boundaries make empathy sustainable. Empathy without boundaries is like a river without a bank. It spills everywhere, and eventually it floods everything, including you. We often think of boundaries as walls, but in truth, they're the only way empathy can remain sustainable. Boundaries are how you say, I can walk with you through this pain, but I cannot carry it for you. Boundaries are how you say, I see you, but I refuse to lose me. It's not selfish to protect your peace. It's not unkind to say no. It's not heartless to take a step back when something becomes too heavy. In fact, those are the most loving things you can do, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. Because no one benefits from a version of you that's depleted, resentful, or running on empty. Empathy doesn't mean you absorb. It means you witness. It means you validate. It means you care without disappearing. The wake-up call, not everyone is meant to be saved by you. There comes a moment, usually after you've cried yourself to sleep for the 10th time, or apologized for your needs again, or stayed silent to keep the peace, when you finally understand not everyone is meant to be saved by you. You can love someone and still walk away. You can be kind and still enforce boundaries. You can be an empath and still choose yourself. Some people will never acknowledge your compassion. Some will take and take until there's nothing left. That doesn't make you unlovable. It just means your love was being misused. The truth is, if your empathy requires you to continuously silence your needs, it's not empathy. It's endurance, and no one was born just to endure. Coming back to yourself when you begin to reclaim your boundaries, It might feel like you're doing something wrong. That's normal. That discomfort you feel, it's just unfamiliarity. You're not betraying anyone. You're coming home to yourself. You are allowed to be both soft and strong. You are allowed to care deeply and protect your energy. You are allowed to love fiercely and still walk away when love starts to cost your sanity. Empathy is a sacred gift, but only when it's rooted in self-respect. Closing reminder, empathy that includes you is the truest form of love. The next time you feel the pull to give past your breaking point, pause and ask yourself, is this compassion or is this self-abandonment? Because you deserve empathy too from others and from yourself, the power of saying enough. There is a moment when the soul can't pretend anymore. Not another day, not another excuse, not another version of maybe tomorrow will be different. That moment is called enough. It's a word that doesn't always come out loud. Sometimes it's a whisper in the dark. Sometimes it's a sudden exhale after years of holding your breath. Sometimes it's a final tear, not because you're broken, but because you're waking up. Enough is a word that changes everything. Enough is a full sentence. We often think of enough as something we must justify, like we need permission to stop, to walk away, to protect our peace. But enough is not a debate. It's a boundary. It doesn't need to be followed by an explanation. It doesn't require a justification. It simply needs to be respected. Yet for so many of us, especially those who identify as empaths, healers, nurturers, the word enough feels like a betrayal. We've been raised to believe that strength looks like staying, that love means never giving up, that being a good person means tolerating more than is healthy. But here's what's true. You can be kind and still say enough. You can love someone and still say enough. You can forgive and still say enough. There is a sacred kind of power in deciding that your peace matters more than someone else's comfort. The false comfort of tolerating too much. Let's talk about something uncomfortable. The cost of constantly tolerating what drains you. When we ignore the red flags, minimize the pain, rationalize the patterns, we're not being strong. We're being afraid, afraid to disappoint, afraid to be alone, afraid that our needs are too much. But here's what we miss every time we say yes when we mean no. Every time we swallow our voice to keep the peace. Every time we pretend we're okay just to avoid confrontation. We trade authenticity for approval. We abandon ourselves in tiny, invisible ways. And over time, those small acts of self-betrayal add up. Until one day, we don't recognize the person in the mirror. Not because we've changed, but because we've been slowly erasing ourselves to fit into places we were never meant to stay. Enough is the doorway to self-respect. Saying enough is not the end. It's the beginning. It's the doorway to self-respect, self-trust, and healing. When you finally say enough, you're choosing honesty over illusion. You're choosing discomfort in the short term to reclaim your dignity in the long term. And yes, it's scary. It might shake everything. People might be shocked. Some may try to guilt you, shame you, gaslight you. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. It means your boundary is doing its job. Here's the thing. People who benefit from your silence will always see your voice as a threat. That's okay. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them adjust to the new version of you. The one who no longer makes herself small to make others feel big. Enough isn't bitterness. It's clarity. Don't confuse enough with anger or bitterness. This isn't about resentment. It's about clarity. It's about realizing that your emotional labor is not an unlimited resource. That love without reciprocity turns into depletion. That staying in places where you're not seen, heard, or valued is not noble. It's unnecessary. Sometimes we need to be reminded, you are not responsible for healing people who keep hurting you. You are not obligated to be the strong one forever. You don't need to prove your worth by enduring emotional chaos. Saying enough doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you started caring about yourself too. The liberation of enough. There's a kind of freedom that only arrives after the final enough. It's quiet at first, Like walking outside after a storm, you might still feel shaky, still question yourself. But then one day you'll notice something. Your laughter is real again, your shoulders are lower, your sleep is deeper, your peace is no longer performative. Because when you remove yourself from what harms you, your nervous system finally gets a chance to rest. That's the miracle of enough. It doesn't just protect your heart. It begins to heal your body, your spirit, your sense of self. You stop living in reaction to others. You start living in response to your truth. Closing reminder, you are allowed to choose. You let this be your reminder today. Enough is not weakness, it's wisdom. Enough is not giving up, it's rising up. Enough is not cruel, it's compassionate to yourself. If you are standing in a moment where your soul is whispering, "This can't continue," listen. That whisper is truth. That whisper is strength. That whisper is the first breath of your freedom. Say it. Mean it. Honor it. Enough is the most loving thing you'll ever say to yourself. Self-compassion is the turning point. There comes a moment on every healing journey when the question shifts from, "Why did they treat me this way?" to, "Why have I been treating myself this way?" That moment is pivotal. It doesn't always feel dramatic. It might not come with a clear sign, but in that quiet recognition, that pause between blame and responsibility, we find something sacred, self-compassion, and make no mistake, self-compassion is the turning point. It's the moment your healing stops depending on someone else's apology. It's the moment you stop begging others to treat you better and start committing to treating yourself better. It's the moment your story begins to change. The voice inside that's been silenced too long. Most of us were taught how to be kind to others long before we were taught how to be kind to ourselves. We learned to say please and thank you, to offer help, to listen patiently. But no one really showed us what to do with our own pain, our own shame, our own inner critic. And so we turned on ourselves. When things went wrong, we blamed ourselves. When people hurt us, we thought we deserved it. When we couldn't get over it, we labeled ourselves weak. But what if the very thing we needed all along wasn't more endurance, more toughness, more proving, but more gentleness? What if the way forward isn't about being better, but being kinder? Self-compassion is not self-pity or excuses. Let's clear something up. Self-compassion is not about avoiding responsibility or denying growth. It's not about pretending things didn't hurt or letting ourselves off the hook for everything. Self-compassion is the practice of acknowledging your pain without punishing yourself for it. It's the radical belief that you can be both a work in progress and worthy of love. It's saying, "I made a mistake and I still deserve kindness. I'm struggling and I won't shame myself for it. I did the best I could with what I knew at the time." We cannot shame ourselves into becoming better people. Shame paralyzes. Self-compassion mobilizes. Shame isolates. Self-compassion connects. If we want real, lasting change in our lives, it starts with how we talk to ourselves when we're hurting. The inner critic and the cost of cruel self-talk. If the voice in your head talked to your friends the way it talks to you, would you let them stay? So many of us have an inner monologue that sounds like a bully. "You're too sensitive. You should be over this by now. You always mess things up. You're not strong enough." And we think this voice is motivating us. But what it's really doing is keeping us stuck in a cycle of shame and self-rejection. Self-compassion isn't about denying the truth. It's about how we hold the truth. It says, "Yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, I've been hurt. Yes, I have healing to do. And I will not make that process harder by being cruel to myself." Healing begins where judgment ends. You can't hate yourself into wholeness. You can't judge yourself into peace. The door to healing only opens with gentleness. When you practice self-compassion, you're not just comforting yourself. You're interrupting generational patterns of emotional neglect. You're standing up for the little version of you who didn't know how to ask for what they needed. You're saying, "I'm not going to abandon myself. Not this time." That's what makes self-compassion a turning point. Because from that place of tenderness, everything starts to shift. You start choosing different relationships. You stop tolerating emotional chaos. You begin to trust your gut again. You make decisions not from fear, but from love. And love, especially self-love, is always a catalyst for transformation. Learning to treat yourself like someone you love. Self-compassion is a daily practice. It's not a one-time declaration. It's a relationship you build with yourself. It's pausing before you criticize yourself and asking, would I say this to a friend? Letting yourself rest without guilt. Forgiving yourself for what you didn't know then. Offering grace when perfectionism tries to take the wheel. Saying, this hurts and I deserve tenderness. It's the difference between healing from a wound and picking at a scar. Self-compassion says, I may be hurting, but I am not broken. It says, I may be learning, but I am still enough. It gives you permission to breathe, to slow down, to feel, all without judgment. Closing reminder, you are worth the care you give others. If you take nothing else from this, let it be this. You are just as deserving of compassion as the people you've poured it into. The love you've extended to others, unconditionally, endlessly, belongs to you too. Healing doesn't begin when they change. Healing begins when you choose kindness over criticism, grace over guilt, and compassion over control. Because self-compassion is the turning point, the moment you stop chasing validation and start coming home to yourself. Leaving isn't a loss, it's a return. We are conditioned to believe that leaving is synonymous with failure. That walking away means giving up, that choosing to let go is somehow a sign of weakness, disloyalty, or defeat. But here's what I know to be true. Sometimes the most powerful thing you will ever do is leave what is no longer serving you. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started remembering who you are. Leaving isn't a loss, it's a return to truth, a return to dignity, a return to yourself. The myth of quitting and the courage of walking away. There's a cultural script we've all internalized. Stick it out. Push through, stay strong, don't quit, don't walk away, keep the peace, be the bigger person, fix it. But what if staying isn't strength? What if staying in an emotionally unsafe space is actually avoidance dressed as endurance? Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is say, this is not love. This is not who I am. This is not what I deserve. Walking away from dysfunction, emotional manipulation, or chronic disrespect doesn't make you weak. It makes you awake. There is nothing noble about staying small to protect someone else's comfort. The grief that comes with leaving. Even when it's right, let's also be honest. Even when it's the right decision, leaving can hurt. It brings grief, not just for what you had, but for what you hoped it could be. Grief for the version of you that stayed for too long. Grief for the energy you spent trying to make it work. Grief for the way you abandoned your own needs to hold space for someone who never held space for you. So yes, leaving is painful, but pain is not the same as regret. Pain is the cost of awakening. It's what happens when you begin to choose truth over illusion. And as Breen often says, we can choose courage or we can choose comfort, but we can't choose both. Leaving is rarely comfortable, but it is always courageous. The moment you realize you're worth returning to, there's a sacred moment, usually quiet, often terrifying. When you look at your life and think, this isn't me. That moment isn't selfish. It isn't impulsive. It's your soul tapping on the walls of your chest, saying, I miss you. I remember who we were before we got lost in this chaos. I want you back. That is the moment of return. The moment you stop orbiting around someone else's gravity and remember that you have your own. The moment you reclaim your voice, your values, your vision. Leaving isn't an escape, it's a reunion with the parts of yourself that were silenced, dimmed, ignored, sacrificed. You are not abandoning anything. You are reclaiming everything. You don't owe anyone your disappearance. So many of us leave without fully leaving. We physically step away, but emotionally we stay tied to the guilt, the fear, the what-ifs. But here's the truth. You do not owe anyone your silence, your continued suffering, or your emotional disappearance. You are allowed to say, I choose peace. I choose healing. I choose myself. And if that makes others uncomfortable, let it. Your return to self will not always be understood by people who benefited from your disconnection. Let that discomfort be part of their growth, not your burden to carry. Redefining what it means to let go. Letting go isn't about erasing the past. It's about deciding that your future matters more. You can honor what you learned without staying stuck in what hurt you. You can feel gratitude for the lessons and still feel justified in your choice to leave. Leaving doesn't make you heartless. It means you finally stopped confusing loyalty with self, betrayal, and here's something no one tells you. There is power in the pause after walking away. A sacred stillness where your nervous system begins to relax, your thoughts begin to clear, and your sense of self begins to rise again. You realize, I can breathe again, I can sleep, I can smile without pretending. I can hear my own voice now. That is the return, not to the past, but to the you that existed before the noise, the chaos, the constant emotional contortion. Closing reminder, you don't have to earn peace by suffering first. You don't have to explain why you left. You don't have to justify your healing. You don't have to earn your worth by surviving pain any longer than necessary. Leaving isn't failure, it's freedom. It's not the end of the story. It's where the real story begins. So if you're standing at the edge of that decision, let this be your reminder. Leaving isn't a loss. It's a return to your values, to your peace, to your power, and most of all, to yourself. Your worth was never measured by their ability to see it. There's a deep, almost primal wound many of us carry. The ache of not being seen, not truly known, not truly valued. We look to others, partners, friends, family, colleagues, for signs that we matter, for proof that we are enough. But what happens when those signs don't come, when the recognition we crave is withheld, when our worth feels invisible to the very people who should cherish it most? Here's the truth you need to hear today. Your worth was never measured by their ability to see it. The illusion of external validation. From the earliest moments, we are taught to seek validation outwardly. Good grades, compliments, likes, promotions, invitations. These external markers shape how we view ourselves. But here's the paradox. No amount of external approval can fill the emptiness of internal disconnection. When our worth depends on someone else's recognition, we hand over the keys to our self-esteem. And that's a fragile place to live. Because people's ability to see us is filtered through their own limitations, fears, and biases. It's not a reflection of our value. It's a reflection of their perspective. When we depend on others to validate us, we are vulnerable to their absence, their silence, their dismissal. The cost of being invisible to those who should see you. It hurts to be overlooked by those who should know you best. To feel like your kindness, your effort, your presence is invisible. When someone who should be your mirror refuses to reflect your light back, it can feel like you're fading. Like you don't matter, but invisibility imposed from outside can only dim you if you allow it. Your true worth isn't a flicker waiting for an audience. It's a flame that burns regardless. We must learn to nurture that flame ourselves. The radical act of owning your worth means stepping off the validation treadmill. It means building an unshakable foundation within. It means waking up every day and saying, I am enough, not because they see me, but because I see myself. This is radical because it goes against every instinct wired in us to seek belonging through others. But here's the liberating secret. When you own your worth, external recognition becomes a bonus, not a requirement. You become your own witness, your own champion. You stop shrinking to fit others' limited perceptions. You stop changing yourself to be more palatable, more visible, more worthy. And in that space of authenticity, you attract people who see you, not just your performance, not just your usefulness, but your essence. Why their inability to see you isn't your deficiency. It's easy to internalize rejection as proof that you're less than, that you're flawed, that you're not enough. But the truth is, their inability to see you is a reflection of them, not you. People who are emotionally unavailable, self-absorbed, or wounded often lack the capacity to truly see others. This doesn't make your light any dimmer. It only means they can't hold the brightness you carry. Their blindness is not your burden to fix. It is theirs to carry. When you fully accept this, you stop wasting precious energy trying to convince someone of your value. You redirect that energy inward to nurture yourself, to heal, to grow. Creating your own mirror, imagine looking in a mirror that reflects all the parts of you you've been taught to hide. Your scars, your quirks, your dreams, your vulnerabilities, all shining back with unconditional acceptance. Creating that mirror within yourself is an act of courage and compassion. It means saying yes to your worthiness even when others don't. It means acknowledging your pain without letting it define you. It means celebrating your strengths even when they go unnoticed. You become your own source of light, your own sanctuary, and that kind of self-recognition transforms your life. Closing reminder, your worth is inherent, unconditional, and irrevocable. If you leave this with one thing, let it be this: your worth does not depend on their ability to recognize it. It is not conditional. It is not earned, it simply is. You were born worthy, you were born whole. The people who fail to see that aren't proof of your inadequacy. They are proof of the limits of their own vision. You are worthy, visible, and loved, even when no one else notices. And the greatest gift you can give yourself is to live in the fullness of that truth every single day. Letting go is a spiritual practice. There's a misconception that letting go is a one-time event, a clean break or a sharp goodbye. But the truth is far more nuanced, far more sacred. Letting go is a spiritual practice. It is an ongoing act of courage, surrender, and grace. It's a daily invitation to loosen your grip on what no longer serves you, so your soul can breathe. Letting go isn't about giving up. It's about showing up differently, more fully, more honestly, and more compassionately with yourself and the world around you. Why we cling so tightly: humans are wired for connection, safety, and certainty. So when faced with loss, whether it's a person, a belief, a dream, or an identity, we clutch tightly, sometimes out of desperation, sometimes out of fear. We hold on to the past because it feels familiar, even when it hurts. We cling to stories, identities, and expectations that no longer fit because they offer a false sense of control. But that grip, while understandable, becomes a cage. It blocks the flow of healing and keeps us stuck in patterns that no longer serve our growth. Letting go is about breaking free from that cage, but it requires more than willpower. It requires spiritual intention. Letting go as an act of surrender. Surrender is often misunderstood as defeat. But surrender is actually an act of radical trust. It's saying, I may not have control over this, but I trust that there is a path forward. Letting go invites us into that surrender. It asks us to release our expectations, our judgments, and our fears. Surrendering doesn't mean we stop caring or stop trying. It means we stop forcing outcomes that aren't meant for us. It means we open our hands instead of clenching them tight. There is profound freedom in that. Freedom to be present, freedom to heal, freedom to grow. The spiritual roots of letting go. Every major spiritual tradition honors the practice of letting go. From Buddhism's teaching on non-attachment to Christianity's call to forgive and release, to indigenous practices of honoring cycles and impermanence, letting go is deeply woven into the human experience. It is a reminder that life is fluid and nothing we hold onto forever will remain. When we embrace this truth, we begin to see that our pain isn't in the loss itself, but in our resistance to it. Letting go becomes a sacred dance between holding on to what's meaningful and releasing what's harmful. The practice of presence and acceptance. Letting go is not a rush to fix or a denial of grief. It is a practice of presence. It asks us to sit with discomfort, to feel deeply, and to accept what is, without needing to change it immediately. This practice is spiritual because it connects us to something larger than ourselves. It reminds us that we are part of a greater flow. It invites humility, patience, and compassion. Through presence, we learn to listen to our inner wisdom, the quiet voice that knows when it's time to hold on and when it's time to release. Acceptance is not resignation. It is acknowledgement without resistance. It is the soil from which healing grows. Letting go to make space for what's next. One of the most beautiful truths about letting go is that it creates space. Space for new relationships, new dreams, new ways of being. When you release what weighs you down, you lighten your soul, you open yourself to possibility. This is why letting go is a spiritual practice, not because it's easy, but because it requires faith that something better awaits. You don't have to see what's next clearly. You only need to trust that it exists. And sometimes the act of letting go itself is the new beginning. The compassion in letting go isn't just about releasing external things. It's also about releasing the stories we tell ourselves, the shame, the blame, the self-judgment. It requires compassion toward ourselves for where we've been and courage for where we're going. It means forgiving ourselves for holding on too long, for mistakes, for being human. This compassionate letting go heals our relationship with ourselves and opens the door to deeper peace. Closing reflection. Letting go is coming home. Letting go is not losing yourself. It's coming home to yourself. It's the spiritual invitation to reclaim your power, not by controlling life, but by flowing with it. In the sacred act of surrender, you find strength. In the courage to release, you find peace. And in the practice of letting go, you discover that you are always enough, whole, worthy, and deeply loved. So today and every day, may you practice the art of letting go, not as a loss, but as a sacred return to your true self. Freedom begins where people-pleasing ends for many of us. People-pleasing feels like survival. It's the unspoken rule we learn early on. Make others comfortable, keep the peace, avoid rejection, earn love. We bend ourselves into shapes we don't recognize, softening our edges, silencing our truths, dimming our light, just to fit in, to be liked, to be seen as good. But here's the raw truth, people-pleasing is a form of captivity. It locks us in a prison built on fear, not freedom, and the key to unlocking those doors is learning to say no, to stand firm, and to embrace the fullness of who we are, even if it means disappointing others. Because freedom, the kind that fills your soul, begins where people-pleasing ends. Why we people-pleasers do what we do. People-pleasing often starts as a strategy to protect ourselves. Maybe we learned early that love was conditional, that we had to be perfect, agreeable, or invisible to avoid rejection or conflict. So we became masters of reading others' needs, anticipating their moods, and sacrificing our own desires to keep the peace. At first, it might feel like a superpower. We are the ones everyone trusts, the ones who hold it together, the ones who never rock the boat, but beneath that facade, something quietly erodes our sense of self. The hidden cost of constant approval, living for others' approval, is exhausting. It drains your energy, clouds your intuition, and makes you a stranger to yourself. When you're constantly trying to please, you lose touch with your own needs and values. You second-guess your feelings, minimize your boundaries, and ignore the little voice inside that's begging for authenticity. Worse, you risk becoming resentful for giving so much and feeling unseen, unheard, and unvalued in return. People-pleasing steals your power and replaces it with anxiety and shame. Recognizing the courage to say no, saying no isn't just a word. It's an act of courage and self-respect. It means choosing yourself even when it feels risky or uncomfortable. It means acknowledging that your time, energy, and feelings are worthy of protection. It means knowing that disappointing others doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. Each no is a small rebellion against the narrative that your worth depends on others' happiness. Freedom through boundaries. Boundaries are the bridge between people-pleasing and freedom. They are declarations of what you will and won't accept, not in anger or defiance, but in clarity and kindness. Boundaries aren't walls, they're gates you control. When you set boundaries, you create space for honest relationships where your true self can be seen and respected. This is where freedom starts, the freedom to be real, vulnerable, and whole. Reclaiming your voice and power freedom grows when you reclaim your voice. When you stop shrinking to make others comfortable and start speaking your truth, even when it shakes the room. When you express your needs, feelings, and desires without fear of rejection. This doesn't mean everyone will like you. It doesn't mean conflict will disappear, but it means you live authentically. You become a beacon for others who are ready to break free too. Healing the fear of disapproval is the shadow that haunts every people pleaser's heart. But here's the secret. The people who truly matter will respect you more for your honesty than your silence. You can't control others' reactions, but you can control your integrity. Choosing freedom means embracing vulnerability, the willingness to be seen exactly as you are, imperfect and real. And in that vulnerability, you find your truest strength. Closing reminder, freedom is yours to claim. If you take only one thing away today, let it be this. Freedom begins where pleasing ends. It begins the moment you stop living to be liked and start living to be loved by yourself. It begins when you honor your own worth, protect your own peace, and speak your own truth. And when you choose freedom over approval, you give others permission to do the same.